Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And visit patreon.com/VMSPod or paypal.me/VMSPod to make a one-time or recurring donation and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. Now, before we get to the show, here's a reminder. I will be interviewing the cartoonist Seth at the Strand Bookstore on Tuesday, May 7th, 2019, for you time travelers, at 7 p.m. in support of his new collection, Clyde Fans, published by Drawn and Quarterly. Visit the Strand site, strandbooks.com, and look up the events calendar to find us. You'll need tickets if you plan to attend. And if you missed that, maybe you'll see me and Seth shooting the breeze during the Toronto Comic Arts Festival next weekend. I'm not moderating any panels there, but I do have a few pod sessions lined up for the weekend, and I'll probably engage in casual conversation with some of the cartoonists, so you may see us if you're meandering through the Toronto Reference Library, the Marriott, etc. Okay, next week is Toronto. Last week was Chicago, and I came back with this week's episode. I also got to have dinner in Chicago with a couple of recent podcast guests, Audrey Niffenegger and Eddie Campbell, which was a lot of fun. In between, I attended a conference, which is why I was actually there, worked on recruiting new members to my trade association, caught up with various work pals, beat the living hell out of the treadmill in the hotel fitness center, which paid off. This Saturday, I ran a 5K race here in my town and set a new personal best, although it wasn't as fast as I'd hoped. 24 minutes, 24 seconds, 7:52 per mile pace, if that matters to you. The way I did this was, for much of the race, I just kind of paced myself behind this older guy, except for this stretch around the 1.5 mile mark where I passed him on the one significant uphill. And then we kind of balanced out again after another half mile. And that worked perfectly fine. We were neck and neck until the last half mile when he pretty much smoked my ass. And we talked afterward. Turns out he's almost 20 years older than me, races all the time. And he was very supportive of what I'm doing, half-assing my way into this stuff, but suggested, well, he and a couple of his older pals gave me some good advice. They all took up running around the time I did, around the age I did, like 47 to 48, and they have a running group a few towns over from mine that I'm now invited to. I should add, though, even after getting smoked by a 67-year-old man, I managed to come in 20th. Out of 200 runners, and second among guys 40 to 49, and nowhere near number one among guys 40 to 49. So they gave me a trophy, and as far as I can recall, it is the first trophy I have ever received. So that's kind of nice. Again, considering I'm pretty much kind of half-assing my training, I'm inclined to think that if I do the whole running thing more rigorously and train better, I can still, unlock a couple of achievement levels before my body deteriorates in my 50s and it all goes downhill. But enough about me. Let's get to that podcast I recorded in Chicago last week. My guest this week is we're going to go with the line from her bio, artist, writer, and occultist Katelan Foisy, also known as La Gitana. For short, I just tell people I recorded a podcast with a witch. Now, I met Katelan a few years ago at a party thrown by another pod guest, Nancy Hightower. It was a masquerade party, but I don't recall what Katelan wore to it. I went in this ornate Mardi Gras mask that's sort of butterfly-ish, which sounds worse than it is. But anyway, my wife came up to me after talking to Katelan at the party and said, "You need to check out her art. It's amazing." So I went over, talked to Katelan. She showed me a few glimpses on her phone, and it had this weird vibe of like the ornate and the hand wrought, kind of like old circus art dripping with decadence, if that makes any sense. But we had a fun, loose exchange back then and connected on Facebook, where I no longer exist. And I said we ought to record a podcast sometime, and she was on board with that, and I added her to the great spreadsheet that knows all. But once I looked her up back at home and connected on Facebook and all that, I saw all of this imagery on her website. There's photos of her that look like a silent movie siren or a sultry pinup model, and all this wonderful writing about magic and tarot and making art, and a lot more of her absolutely gorgeous artwork. And I thought, yeah, she's got a lot of layers. I really should sit down with this person and have a conversation. So we tried to connect once or twice for a podcast over a couple of years, never came off. And then she moved from New York to Chicago, which made it more complicated. But still, over the years, every so often, like if I would go online and say I'm looking for potential guests somewhere, she would pipe up with suggestions, which actually led to shows with Maria Alexander and Katelan's collaborator, Vanessa Sinclair, which I did about a year or so ago. So with the Chicago business trip coming up, I figured I'd try again. And fortunately, I caught Katelan between co-hosting a glamour magic retreat in Marrakesh and a tarot retreat in New Orleans that she'll be hosting coming this weekend. Now, I will admit I am not doing justice in the slightest to what it is about Katelan's work and her persona that's so, well, bewitching. In her bio, you'll get an idea of just how accomplished her art is. And if you visit her site or her Instagram feed that has a lot of great stuff on it, you'll see much more of what I'm talking about and why I was really hoping we could sit down for a conversation. Now, as caveats go, not a whole lot. Little police car noise outside at one point. I was coming off a delayed plane flight and a long-ass day, so my voice is a little more sinusy than usual. But that's about it. Now, here's Katelan's bio. Katelan Foisy is a multimedia artist, occultist, and writer. Her fine art pieces have been displayed at the Worcester Art Museum, Ohio History Museum, MoDA, Weem, A&D Gallery, and Last Rites. She has graced the pages of the Grammy Award programs and the stage of Cynthia von Bühler's immersive historical plays Speakeasy Dollhouse and The Brothers Booth. Katelan has been featured in the New York Times, Elle Magazine, Paper Magazine, GQ Italy, Time Out New York, Witches and Pagans, and many others for her work as an artist, curator, and occultist. She has written for Motherboard Vice, Electric Literature, Luna Luna, Eris Magazine, Coil House, and held events with Atlas Obscura and lectured at Morbid Anatomy. Her short films have been shown at Cinémathèque Française as part of the Romani Avant-Garde Film Sessions, and her illustrations are featured on the Smashing Pumpkins' Shiny and Oh So Bright tour, as well as William Patrick Corgan's Ogallala tour. She is the artist for the Sibyl's Oraculum with Tiana McQuiller and the forthcoming Hoodoo Tarot. Chaos of the Third Mind, with Vanessa Sinclair, will be released in 2020 from Fulgar Limited, UK. She was called a female Jack Kerouac by Taylor Mead, a modern-day Francesca Woodman by Cynthia von Bühler, and William Patrick Corgan has said they used to burn witches like Katelan. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Katelan Foisy. I don't want to say motto, I guess slogan on your website is making magic from the mundane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, making magic out of the mundane.
Out of the mundane. Talk about magic and without you thinking I'm being derisive or mean or anything like that, but tell me magic not quite as metaphor, what it is for you.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of metaphor, but yeah. It's a lot of different things. I mean, magic can mean, you know, when you look at a magician on stage, like he's creating this atmosphere. Magic is energy. Magic is tapping into things that you don't normally see with the naked eye and, you know, working with those energies to create something that's awe-inspiring. Mm-hmm. So it can mean a number of different things, but, you know, like magic is poetry too. Yeah. Magic is writing. It's bringing you into these worlds. And that's what I always think of is magic is like opening doors that you didn't know existed.
Mm-hmm. Where'd it begin for you?
Both really, really young.
Yes, in this conceptualized version of it and then that instinctual way, you know, what did it mean?
So as a child, I mean, I was the one that was in the field picking buttercups and filling them with honey and like sticking them in the forest by the tree with like popsicle sticks. And my parents and my grandmother told me a lot of different, they told me fairy tales, but they also told me about fairies. And they were like, yeah, there's fairies in the back. And I was like, great, like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. My mom said that I had like a lot of imaginary friends. And I would set places for them at the dinner table. And when my sister was born, apparently they all left, and I blamed my sister.
As one should. You got to have resentment somehow for people. So.
But I think also it was watching my grandmother in the garden and seeing her sort of plant these herbs, talk to the herbs, picking the herbs and the vegetables, and then making things out of them. And, you would see her like apply honey to wounds. And I was like, what is this? Yeah. So I just watched her. She always said it was nothing, but
you knew.
Yeah, And also when I was in grade school, they did this weird thing back in the 80s where they were like, who goes to church? And like asked everyone in class, and everyone's like, I do. And they're like, who goes to Sunday school? And everyone's like, I do. And I was like the only person in class that was just like sitting there. And I was like, okay, something's different. And then, you would talk to your friends and someone would get hiccups. And I always use this as an example, but, I'd be like, oh yeah, just get a red string and put a key on it and throw it over your left shoulder. They'll be gone. And they're like, what? And I was like, okay. So apparently, like, this isn't totally normal. But then growing up, I started to look at different books. My mom's a librarian, so she allowed me to kind of just like run through the library and just sort of pick out whatever I wanted. And then I found the occult section, and it was like, oh my God.
See, I like the fact you're old enough that it was a cult. Because
yes.
Now it's new age. When we were kids,
it was a cult. Yeah. And I mean, I love that my mom was just like, whatever.
Yeah, sure, dude. Go nuts. Yeah.
Like, she's like, at least she's reading, Like,
they thought the same thing about comic books with me, not realizing just how much it was really damaging my psyche, or opening it up to something weird.
Yeah. So, my mom just let me kind of go wild. And also, I mean, if you look at the books that I read as a kid, like my favorite book was The Werewolf Family, which is about like this family that turns into werewolves on, a full moon and like completely terrorizes their boring family. And I was like, this is great. And then like the, like scary stories to tell in the dark. So obviously like I had already, kind of like fallen into this little thing of like, where's the mystery? But I started reading these books and I was like, oh, wow, like these are things that I'm doing. Or, like these are things that Oma does. And, I just started putting it all together and being like, okay, so like there's something more out here. Because like my grandmother really didn't talk about it. Like she moved here like after.
Where are they from?
My grandma's from Austria. My mom was born in Austria. And this was like after World War II. So this is like, like early 50s, like, and there was still a lot of hatred for Germans and Austrians. And so my grandmother just like decided that she was going to be as American as possible. But she never lost her accent, which was really funny because like she'd just be like, I'm American. And it's like, yeah, God, like, but she wouldn't allow us to like speak another language. Like she just didn't want anything like that to destroy the facade of us being, fully American. And, later on, as I must have been in my early 20s, when my grandmother passed away, like she finally told us that we were Romani, but she had kept it a secret for all those years. But I mean, I was like, okay, like you lived through World War II. You're not going to be like,
all things considered, that's not a bad thing to discover about your family, as opposed to the question I was going to ask. So did you ever find out about their history? And
but yeah, so I mean, basically when the Nazis came through, they forced everyone to be a Nazi. And, she had to kind of hide all of that. Yeah. And then when she moved to the U.S., like she was just trying to be as American as possible, and she never talked about the war. So like, we had no clue that we were. And then finally, like I begged her, which is like so awful. Like I begged her on her deathbed to like tell me.
Yeah. But again, if you don't, you're never going to learn. That's
and I felt bad doing it, but I did get the answers. And then even like some of the family that grew up in Austria afterwards were just like, no, that's not possible. And I was like, okay, people don't usually lie when they're about to pass away. Like,
yeah. There's that, I don't want to say cultural amnesia because that's a specific thing, but we don't talk about those years.
Right,
or
right.
We don't know. We never asked.
Yeah. And I mean, even when she saw something about World War II on TV, she would just switch like the channel right away. Like it was such a huge trigger for her. So, we just grew up not asking.
Yeah.
Because we were terrified, like, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Jeez. I bring it up only because my own personal mythology was my father's Romanian. We're Jewish, and with us it was you were adopted from the gypsies down in the woods, and we kept the receipt and can always bring you back anytime. This
my
is
mom
basically
said that I was left on the doorstep by gypsies.
With us it was actually adopted from gypsies, but we kept the receipt because ethnic stereotype that we had. They had to threaten us with, we could return you just down in the woods over there.
My mom also told me that I was left on the doorstep by fairies, and the kids used to pick at my wings, so she had to cut them off.
See, I just don't think we were made for like normal America of the 70s, 80s, et cetera. But how do you, launching far ahead, the whole personal mythology thing, I don't want to, branding is the coarse term for it, but having a sort of mythos of who you are and portraying that publicly and being you.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because I don't think at first I realized I was doing it.
Yeah. And
then, people would come up to me and they'd be like, oh my God, like you're so like funny and giggly in real life and like, online. And I was like, online? I thought I was being the same.
But you're captured, you're captured in two dimensions.
Right. Yeah. So I think it started out through, my love of writing, but also my love of photography. And growing up, I was told, not by my family, but like, by teachers and stuff that I just wasn't good at photos. And so I didn't do it for a really long time. And then the personal mythology started coming in when I started taking these self-portraits. And most of them were to kind of get a grasp on kind of like my emotions and what I was going through. Because I was like, I just don't understand myself. But when I looked at myself and almost like these personas of emotions, then I was like, okay, I get it. I can process this now. But I needed like a physical thing to kind of look at. And I'm a very visual person. So then I just started thinking, I'm like, okay, like I'm, all these different things. And then I started thinking of these stories that my mom told me about myself when I was little. And I think most of it really does go back to childhood. Like my mom was like, you used to stand on the rocks and put your hands in the air and like say something. And I'd be like, what are you doing? And you're like, calling in the storm. And she's like, and the storm would come. And she's like, I don't know how you did it. Or, like I had scarlet fever, and I had chickenpox 3 times. And, my mom's like, that's not really normal. Yeah. And then William S. Burroughs had this theory about scarlet fever, where he thought that it opened doorways into the spirit realm. So he thought that anyone that had scarlet fever would, automatically have like this gateway into the spirit realm. And so Patti Smith had scarlet fever. He had scarlet fever. And, so I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. And of course, I was really young when I found out about Burroughs.
I was going to ask, because it can, same thing.
I think I was like 12 or 13.
Yeah,
and I was like, this
it can get you.
Doesn't feel good, but I can't stop.
Wow.
And so I started reading on him and his ideas about dreams. And that was really, really intriguing because I was like, okay, like, I have this writing, I'm interested in all these arts, and just going back to all of these stories, I was like, in order to understand ourselves, maybe we should create this personal mythology. And I did. I wrote this whole story about myself where it's like, they used to call me Storm Child. And, I talk about my astrology chart where I was born under the star Algol, which is like Medusa. It's the demon star. And there's a whole, mythology to that too, where like people that are born under this, like some of them become beheaded. Yep. For stupid reasons, like they put their scarf on, we're like, I'm in my Corvette, and then it's like, oops. But I'm not going to be doing that.
There's the new show on What We Do in the Shadows, the vampire show that's basically a comedy like The Office. There's this one reincarnated character who's apparently beheaded in every one of his incarnations. He ends up getting his head chopped off at some point. So.
Maybe he was born under the demon
Now it makes sense.
I think it's like May 13th through 16th or 17th.
Gotta watch out.
But so I took all of these different aspects of my life and I kind of put them together and I created a narrative and I was like, okay, like, you know, I want to create the most magical existence for myself. And how can I do this? I'm going to create this mythology and I'm going to use art and work with it to, you know, create this reality. Mm-hmm. And so I always joke that I live in a fairy tale and then all of a sudden, like, all this stuff happens and, you know, I'll be like, oh, you know, right now I feel like Snow White, and then deer will follow me in the cemetery. And I'm like, oh, yes. And everyone's like, please, if you find an old lady in the woods that hands you an apple, just don't eat it. And I was like, but they're so delicious.
You'll never find out if you don't try.
Right. But I think as I started creating these narratives, it just started opening more doors for me because I was like, okay, you know, if I'm creating this, anything is really possible. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Burroughs, again, going back to Burroughs, because he's like a huge influence on me, is he thought that you could write your way out of any situation. He also thought that with like photographs, you could completely change the future. So there was a coffee shop that opened up in his neighborhood. He didn't like it because it was filled with hipsters. And it sort of got in the way of like, you know, like the young boy prostitutes that were on his corner. And he was very upset about this. So he took pictures of it and basically erased it from the photos. And within like, I think it was like 6 months to a year, the place was gone and he was so happy. He was like rejoicing. But he also said whenever he has a problem, he just writes his way out of it. So he would write himself in the problem and then write a solution for it. And it would just completely change the energy of everything. And I was like, this is really brilliant. Because even when I started writing, you know, in my teens, I would find that whatever I wrote, I would end up meeting the people I wrote about. And I was like, okay, something's happening here. And that's why I get a little like worried about sci-fi because I'm like, man,
you don't want to go too far ahead. And,
what are we doing? But
is there a degree that you mentioned how they meet the real Katelan and you're giggly and you're funny. Does it ever lead to issues if it's somebody who wants to commission you for work and I thought I was getting the witch queen and you know, I got someone I can talk to, you know?
I mean, most of the time, like, people are really cool about everything. You know, I've had like a few people that have gotten very obsessed with me, which is a little bit scary.
The internet, and you photograph beautifully, and that's
and so that can become like the dark side of things. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm lucky to have friends that are, you know, much more in the limelight than I am, and so they can kind of help me navigate it, because otherwise, I mean, I really wouldn't know how to handle it. Like, I've had people that were clients and then, you know, started thinking of me as, you know, some sort of goddess or spirit, and thinking that their dreams were actually like reality. And I'm like, no, like, this is your mind processing. And, you know, I symbolize an aspect in it, but, you know, so it can be a little bit scary that way, but most of the time, like, people are really cool with me. Cool. So, you know, most of the time they're just like, oh, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I had trepidation asking, is it okay if I come to your place? Just because I figure you've had enough crazy shit go on in your life that weird guy from New Jersey shows up with microphones. Could be weird. But you seem totally, you know, into it and everything's fine. And
no, it's
you know.
Totally fine.
Cool. Besides Burroughs, do you have any other, we'll say patron saints? Secular saints, I guess.
I do. I mean, I was Burroughs and Geisen, Brian Geisen. So I love Brian's work with art and writing, and the way that he sort of mixed both of them. And then I was just looking for this book right before you were coming, like, Sarah J.T. Leroy.
Oh, yeah.
So I love Laura. I think she's amazing. She's such a brilliant writer. And, you know, I was so happy to meet her like a couple of years ago. And, you know, we talk sometimes, and I'm like, man, this woman's words are just like... like, I don't know. I mean, it's magic, you know, like whatever comes through her and channels through her, you know, JT or, you know, whoever she's channeling is just amazing. And she's amazing.
And they just did a film now, right?
Yeah, well, that has nothing to do with her.
Yeah, just about the phenomenon.
Yeah, but the documentary is actually very good.
Yeah.
So I always suggest to people, I'm like, you may want to skip out on like the Hollywood aspect of it.
That's always
like,
a disaster.
The documentary is actually very good. Cool. And then, of course, Molly Crabapple. You know, I've just seen her transform over the years, and she's got such a brilliant brain that I'm just in awe of her all the time. I mean, you know, I'm so happy to be close with her. But you know, and I'm lucky enough that I've gotten to read some of like before it was published, you know, like just like, you know, like bits and pieces that she was putting together. And it's just like, wow, like I love watching this transformation. Warren Ellis, you know, he's been huge in my life, and like his writing is just so, again, it's one of those things where like, this doesn't make me feel good. I'm going to go further.
just his weekly emails every Sunday. It's I at some point have to meet up with this dude and sit down, but I'm afraid he's just going to burn out and, you know, explode before it ever happens. But yeah.
He's amazing. He's amazing. So, you know, I just feel very lucky that so many of like my favorite writers and people have swirled into my life.
Yeah, did you ever have the question I like to ask people, the holy shit moment when you met an idol of yours who you just completely froze and were tongue-tied around? Or do you tend to inspire that in other people so you get over it in your own...
I don't think I've ever... You know what? I did make a fool of myself in front of Patti Smith.
Yeah, see, okay, that's...
Yeah. I did make myself...
An anecdote you want to share, or one that you're hoping never to you're going to be cringing about when I leave?
Yeah, it was... I'm trying to think when it was. Oh my God. I'm going to have to think back on this because I'm trying to think. I know it was at a memorial for a friend. Mm-hmm. It was a mutual friend of ours. And I was trying to like give her, you know, like a picture or something that I had taken of them. Yeah. And I just like shook and started crying, and I was just, I don't know, I was a hot mess. And she was so sweet about it.
At least in that circumstance, it sounds like the emotionally distraught could be tied into the memorial part as opposed to the, oh my God, it's Patti Smith, even though it was probably more, oh my God, it's Patti Smith.
Yeah, because I met her when I was really young, and, you know, she was always super fierce, but, you know, I was at the show and I was trying to like take photos of the show for like some, you know, school paper or something. And all of these journalists just pushed me out of the way, and she got really mad and she just yelled at them all, and she wouldn't let them take pictures, and she'd only let me take pictures. And so I felt really special.
I had a guest, I think end of last year, who, back in, I guess, 70s, she came down into the audience and everybody parted, and he just walked up to her and gave her the poems that he'd written, that he was hoping he was going to be able to give to her at the show, thinking that she was going to read them and, you know, grab 18-year-old, you know, Southern California guy and turn him into, you know, the next Mapplethorpe or something. Did not happen. He never heard back. Anytime the phone rang, though, for the next year or so as a kid, he'd always race over thinking it was going to be Patti Smith calling his family's house to you know. Again, we all have our idols. We all have our freakouts. But you know. How did you, and you mentioned the photography and writing, what was the progression into visual art, into painting and everything else? Well, or how do those things all synthesize for you, I guess?
My grandmother on my father's side was a painter. Yeah. So, you know, when I was younger, I would go to her house and she would be painting in watercolors, and she would sort of show me certain things. And I think she introduced me to the book, like Drawing on the Right Side of Your Brain. Yeah. And so we would do like little exercises from that. And then I just never thought that I would be an artist. Like I was just like, no, I'm going to be a famous actress. This is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And when I was really little, like I really wanted fame. And then as I got into high school, I was like, I don't know about this. I want to maybe rethink my career choices. I don't know. I was like 60 and I was like, I should really rethink this.
Hey, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Ludlow, Massachusetts. Okay. So, I was just sort of rethinking it, and I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like Madonna's Truth or Dare, but seeing like people just sort of hound her, and then watching old Beatles movies, like it really freaked me out.
Chasing me on the sidewalk,
and I was like, oh my God, that's really terrifying. Or, seeing Madonna's Truth or Dare, and I was like, she doesn't get any privacy. Like, this is really scary. And it started to really freak me out. So then I just started transitioning like into like an artist. I was like, okay, I'm just going to paint now. I'm going to paint and draw. And I thought I was going to be like a graphic designer. And so I went to Pratt Institute, and I started studying illustration there. And I had a hard time like in school, because I was just like, I went through like some crazy stuff. Like, I was going to get married when I was a teenager. I know, like, we're totally smart then.
Everybody's got weird-ass paths they've taken, don't worry.
And then, he died of a heroin overdose. So I was like,
that
well,
saved you.
That kind of got rid of that plan. But, so I was definitely trying to, like, figure that stuff out while I was in college, and I was having a really hard time with it, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. But, I mean, I was obviously good at what I was doing because my teachers were all passing me. And then when I got out of school, I was just like, okay, I just need to make this happen. And, I started putting out my portfolio. It wasn't very good at the time, but I was still getting jobs. And I, like, emailed a rep, and she was like, you'll probably be the youngest person that I've ever taken on. And I was like, great. Like, and she did, and she helped me out for a while, and then we parted ways a few years ago. But as time went on, I was just like, okay, do I really want to be like doing mostly illustration, or do I want to do my own work? And it was sort of a mixture of both, because I don't mind doing illustrations. I don't mind like reading stories and trying to figure out like a great way to kind of illustrate them. But I definitely wanted to have something of me in them. And my teacher in Pratt, Rudy Gutierrez, he is really amazing at putting himself in his art. Yeah. Like, he could get himself in there, and it's like, it feels like Rudy, like you look at it and you're like, yeah, Rudy. And he's the one that taught me that. He was like, find a way to put yourself in everything that you're doing. So I was like, okay. And, I was working on that and taking up different projects, and, doing different, publishing projects like the Sibyl's Oraculum with Tiana McQuiller. And then just recently, like a couple of years ago, it's funny that I'm telling this story, but I like lost 3 jobs in like 1 week, and it wasn't anyone's fault. Like, it was just like funding didn't come through. So, I sent messages to, all of my friends, and I was like, hey, if you know anyone that needs an illustrator, art, or whatever, just like send them my way. And then I like got the courage to like send it to Billy Corgan too, because I was like, you know what, he's my friend, and he should know like when bad things happen to me. I can't like keep him, like he's gonna know, he's gonna hang out with me and know something's wrong. So I sent something to him too, and I was like, look, if you know anyone who needs art. And he was like, actually, he called me up right away. And he was like, what do you need? And he was like, actually, I need art right now. So let's work together and see what happens. And it was actually beautiful. Like, he was like, wow, it's like you can see inside my head and illustrate what I need. And so then we started working together, and he was like, the reason that we work together so well is because we both speak in poetry. And he was like, and that's why we're both hard to understand.
Nice.
And I was like, you know what? That's true.
Yeah. You're the second guest who's designed for Smashing Pumpkins. I've recorded with Wayne White also, who did the puppets for Tonight, I guess.
That was,
one of the videos, the one with the submarine and So I have common threads throughout the show. How did your friendship start? Is it something you're cool talking about? Totally. I just don't want to intrude on his privacy. And
no, we talk about it, backstage after shows too. People ask us all the time. We met through his former bassist, Nicole Ferrantino, who I actually grew up in Ludlow with. Mm-hmm. We went to kindergarten together and then throughout school. Her and I had sort of kept in touch over the years through, social networking and things like that, and just sort of watching each other's careers grow. And she came into New York, it must have been 2012 or 2013. She was like, I haven't seen you in a really long time. why don't you come to the show tonight? And they were doing a small show. It was for like iHeartRadio. And she was like, hey, I've been telling Billy a lot about you because like you guys are both really interested in tarot. And she's like, you guys seem really similar. So I was like, okay. So went to the show, and then afterwards we all went out for like a big group dinner, and his manager at the time was like, oh, this is the woman that's into tarot. And like Billy turned around and was like, wait, what? Like, and so so we just like had this like crazy conversation about tarot and like esoteric things, and at the end, like, you know, like we gave each other a hug, and he was like, hey, you know, like, try to keep in touch with me. And I was like, okay. And then, you know, nothing came of it. They went on tour. You know, I would talk to Nicole while they were on tour, but, and she would relay messages sometimes. And then I happened to be coming to Chicago because he had a tea shop at the time, and a friend of mine was like, you should do a tarot class here. So I got off the plane, and Nicole was like, hey, I'm in town. It's Billy's birthday. Like, he wants you to come for his birthday party. And I was like, okay, cool. And so we just started talking at his birthday party, and he was like, okay, now we definitely have to keep in touch. Yeah. And so we did, and the friendship just grew because we have so much in common, and we just really understand each other. And, you know, even since I've moved here, like, you know, now it's even grown even more because it's just like, oh, now we get to like hang out, you know, more often and talk about these things and really just sort of like brainstorm. And it's like we did a third mind that. Yeah. So,
well, I'll bring that up. Because Vanessa's also a past guest.
Yes. So we did a third mind, and ever since then, like, he's like, yeah, like, we're just totally, you know, like, right in each other's, like, spheres, like, creating these ideas. So it's really beautiful.
Did you have any weird thing about telling him you didn't actually like Smashing Pumpkins before you... I'm just kidding. Oh, no. You know, I don't actually like your music, but still, we get along well.
No, I love the Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh, thank God. Okay, because I was afraid, you know, it'd be some
actually,
sort of...
Nicole and I, in junior high, used to decorate our school books. Yeah. And, like, I remember I used to do their logo on my brown paper school books, like, Smashing Pumpkins. And I was so into the Tonight Tonight video. Yeah. Oh, my God. I mean... Obviously, like, I loved silent film. Yeah. And, like, my first crush was Nosferatu. So then, of course, when they did, like, Ava Adore and Billy was all dressed up like Nosferatu, then I had a big crush on him. Which did I ever tell him that? I don't know. But now he'll know. but, you know, when I saw that, I was like, oh, my God, like, this is, like, Millet. Like, I was like, this is brilliant. And, I mean, I just... thought the music was like nothing that I had heard before because it was a mixture of rock and classical and like
cello makes everything better.
Yeah.
That's always with rock music. I found that, you know, Bob Mould, when he slowed down after Husker Du, put some cello on that and boom, all of a sudden it's a different sound. And,
and it was just like, I don't know, it was I just remember just resonating with the Smashing Pumpkins so much and just being like, they're tapping into something really big here. And I couldn't figure out what it was, but it's just like energetically they were tapping into like what people were feeling and just like bringing it up to the surface. And it was just so poetic and beautiful. And I mean, and all of the songs were amazing. So
Zero shuffled up on my iPod on the flight out here. So I figured that was a sign also that we should definitely bring them up. And you know, but where did the tarot start for you?
That started when I was
with the occult section, I assume, but you know.
When I was in 6th grade, I went to Provincetown with my best friend at the time, and we stopped into this tiny store called the Mystic Tree of Life. And I walked in, and I just saw this deck, and it wasn't even like a pretty deck. It was, I think it was like the Royal Fez Moroccan deck, which is a very odd color combination. Like it's like bright yellow, bright blue, bright red, and then I think there's some purple in it. Mm-hmm. But everything else is black and white. So it's like a really odd... And then I think there's some green in there, too. But it's not like a beautiful color combination. But I was like, I want this deck. And, you know, I think it, like, cost me $15, which was, like,
at
huge.
The time, that's,
whoa, you know, like, $15, 12 years old. Like, but... I started, like, looking at it, and I was trying to read for my friends, and, of course, you know, like, in the beginning, I was, like, awful at it, but I decided to sleep with the cards under my pillow, and then I was trying to learn all the meanings, and that wasn't working, and then I just decided to let the cards speak to me. So I would look at the pictures and I would put myself into the pictures and be like, okay, what would I be experiencing if I was this person or in this card? And that's how I understood the tarot. Is like I had to go through each one and just put myself in there and be like, okay, like what am I experiencing in here? Okay. And then when I put them down, I would look at who's interacting with who's facing each other, you know, what story, and it looked like a storyboard, you know, and someone who loves comics.
I was going to ask also, I mean, you mentioned Warren earlier, but how like much were comics playing into your development?
Yeah, and of course, oh my God, I didn't even mention Neil Gaiman before, and like, he's one of my favorite authors, and I was like, oh my God, like, but you know, when someone asks you, it's like, all of a sudden you're like,
yeah, whoever you forget is the one that you're going to kill yourself over. But
I know. But you know, as someone who loves comics, like once I saw it as a storyboard, it just really started speaking, and I was like, okay, I understand this now.
Yeah, my wife was asking. She let's see, she had a reading with Jessa Crispin a year or so ago.
I love Jessa.
Yeah, she's a doll, and she got Jessa's Unlocking the Tarot, the tarot creative art thing. But she said, one thing, if you can ask Kayla, does she have any book I should be reading on this otherwise? Because she's been doing her own, you know, from a creative perspective. But again, it sounds like it's more.
I think, I mean, if she wants to learn, I mean, really meditate with the cards, like, you know, take, you know, one or like a couple a day and like put yourself into them. And that's what I did. Like, I just like I started with like the majors, and I was like, okay, like, let me go on this fool's journey and let me see what he has to tell me. And that's how I really, really started learning.
And you've painted your own deck, or half of? On your site, there's only part of. But
yeah, I started to, and then all of these other projects came through, and I was like, okay. Yeah. And then it just started to not feel like me anymore. And I was like, you know.
How so?
I was like, well, at the time I was like painting all my friends, and I wanted to create this world. And then my aesthetic started changing. And I was like, oh, man. You know, and I was like, well, these paintings are beautiful on their own, so I'm going to keep them as they are. But I was like, if I am going to do a deck, like I just have to understand it might shift and it might change. And it did, like it started shifting and changing. So I was like, okay, like maybe I might revisit this later. But for the moment, I'm going to have to put it aside. And then, of course, you know, Tiana and I got the Sibyl's Oraculum deal, which is, it's all about the Black Doves of Africa, which was a secret society of women that were essentially like the seers of that time. And it's like 1st century BCE, like Africa, and going into Rome. And so, you know, there was a lot of crossover there. And, you know, so I got to like paint these like amazing mosaics. Yeah. And that was also a little bit scary because I felt like I don't paint mosaics. And then Tiana was like, I totally believe in you. And I was like, okay, like if other people believe in me, I guess I should too.
And it turns out you do paint them once you finally paint them.
Yes, yes. And that's one of the things that like working with Tiana and Billy has really taught me is like, just break out of your mold. Yeah. Because like Billy would be like, I think that you would be great at doing this. And I'm like, I haven't done that since I was 8. And he's like, just do it. Yeah, you'll find out. Do it a week. Like, and I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah, and that's that question of the I'd say commercial versus personal art thing.
Right.
Like, how do you juggle that? Or is everything...
I mean, it's
how much do you make for yourself, I guess?
It's a little, like, intermixed. Yeah. You know, so, like, the Hoodoo Tarot is... a project that Tiana and I just finished. It's coming out with Inner Traditions next year. And so that one, it was like, okay, I was really inspired by all of her research. And we got to use like historical images in it, which was like awesome to me. Because I was like, yeah, you know. And it made me like go into, you know, like this thing of like collage and sort of painting. And I was like, great. So, you know, that's a commercial project, but it was also very intimate. And, you know, while it wasn't totally me, I felt like I was like channeling for these spirits. So I was like, all right, these are their stories, you know, like I'm just going to be like the person that just makes it come together. For my own stuff, I mean, I get, you know, inspired by like occult stuff, you know, like there's like the drawing on my wall over there that I keep looking at, but that's like, you know, a monopatea, like, which is for protection. And it's like, you know, it's a historical thing that you can find it in a bunch of like the occult books, but I added my own things to it. You know, I get really inspired by 1920s, like 1930s and 1940s, like fairs and oddities, you know, so I needed a paper moon in my house. That was like a personal project, but it turned into other things too. But I think I try to add a little bit of myself to everything. Like even on my website, like I have like the La Gitana, like, it almost looks like a shrine to myself,
but again, personal mythology.
Right. But it's like, you know, I took all of these like butterflies and playing cards and things, and I wanted it to sort of look like an old fortune telling machine out of like an old circus. And I feel like that's part of the mythology too. So everything that I do that is commercial also plays into the mythology, like the Hoodoo Tarot. Like, yes, of course you would see like, you know, like the quote unquote fortune teller in this odd circus that blows into town using this tarot, or, you know, teaching you about the Sibyls. So it's a mix of all of these things. So I try to put a little of myself in everything.
Yeah, do you have a particular, I guess, strain of I don't want to say belief, a tradition, I guess, that you find, or again, it sounds like Romani, you know, sort of the center of it, but you're weaving together other traditions and other themes.
Well, I do have...
and then run the risk of cultural appropriation in the process of doing that and blah, blah, blah.
Well, in 2008, 2007, 2008, I got initiated into Santeria. And I mean, I just have my Alekes and my warriors. You know, I'm not claiming to be a priestess or anything like that. But that happened because I was working at the Body Shop years ago. That's the lotion store. Some people are like, you fix cars? And I was like, no. And I was working with a group of people, and some of them were initiated into Santeria. And then there was another woman that was initiated into Voodoo. But we would talk about occult stuff, and we would, you know, have these really amazing conversations. And the manager, the woman that was initiated into Voodoo, like, she was like, you know, there's this book by Louisa Tesh that I think you should read. And it was like the Natural Woman's Workbook. And I started reading it, and Louisa talks about Voodoo, but she also talks about Santeria. And she sort of talks about them like intertwined. I mean, they're sister, you know, sort of like religions, but... and I learned about the Orishas and the Loa, and for the first time, I think, besides what I learned, you know, from my grandmother, like, things made sense. Because I tried to get into Wicca, and I just couldn't understand it. Yeah. Like, I was like, Lord and Lady? Why? Yeah. Like, you know, and I'm not putting anyone down. No, like, but, it's just, you know, but it just didn't...
In Western Massachusetts in the 90s.
That was huge.
I went to Hampshire for 3.5 years. Right. So, yeah, I knew that era and that system. Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't really understand this. Or, you know, it wasn't resonating with me. I just... And when I started talking to people about Santeria, it was resonating. Like, I could understand all of the parakis, like the stories. I could really understand the Orishas because they were so human in like their emotions, and they didn't feel far away. Whereas in Wicca, like, everything felt very far away, that you were kind of like, you have to draw down the moon and you have to do this and you have to pull it in. And like the Orishas were like, look, these are our stories. Like, you know, like, this is what we do. And I started talking to more people. I ended up following Ochani Lele on LiveJournal, which, I mean, I feel like LiveJournal was a magical time in, like, everyone's life.
So Kyle Cassidy is sticking with that as his platform. That's the one guy I know who still says, on LiveJournal, you can see my latest... Really?
But, oh, my God. Yeah, like, that's how I met him. It's on LiveJournal.
That's one guy who's sticking with it.
And... You know, I started following his blog, and then one day I just, you know, started messaging him, and I was like, hey, would you be willing to look at an email that I want to send? And he was like, well, why don't you give me a call? Because it's probably going to take a while for me to write back to you. So I was like, okay. We started talking, and he was like, okay, well, I'm not going to say yes to, like, you being my goddaughter until you go to a couple tambours, you go to a couple ceremonies, you see what's actually happening. He was like, I'm going to give you my god family's name and number. I'll tell them that you're going to go, and it's your choice, like, but you have to show up. So I was like, okay. So I went there totally freaked out, not knowing what to do, and they were so nice to me. And then Babaluaye, which is one of the Orishas, came down, and he just ran up to me and he like put his hands on my neck, and I was like, oh, what's happening? Like, and he was like, he just started yelling at everyone. He was like, where's her Lekes? He was like, she's supposed to be here. And so I called up Ochani after, and I was like, hey, and he was like, well, it sounds like the Orishas want you, you know. He was like, so no one's going to argue with that. And I was like, okay. So then I got my Lekes and my warriors, and unfortunately, because I moved and because I work freelance, I'm not able to go to a lot of like the community events, because it's like I was working parties when, you know, everyone else was getting ready for like tambors and stuff. So I feel like I missed out on that a little bit. But, you know, the community there is so beautiful and so rich. And I feel like that religion is so like rich in storytelling, but also community, you know, like, and I say that I missed a bunch of it, but I mean, I did get to experience some of it, but it's Did
you tell your parents you regret not being reared in that faith?
My parents were like, my sister,
we didn't know
oh my God.
We didn't know anything. Yeah,
my sister got so confused. She was like, you're getting initiated into sangria? I was like, no, Bernie, I'm not becoming an alcoholic. Like, my parents, I think it took a little while for them to get used to it, because they were just like, we don't know about like the animal sacrifice. And I was like, well, you have to think of it this way. When this was, you know, like, you have to think of it as feeding the community. I was like, because when there are like sacrifices, like everyone in the community that goes to these things eats. Yeah. You know, it's not going to waste. It's not like, it's like, well, you know, like, get rid of this goat and throw it out the window, you know, like it's like, you know, you're cooking it. Mm-hmm. There's people there to skin it and cook it and like make a meal out of it, and everyone is eating together. So it's like, it's not going to waste. And I think that made them kind of understand it more, but they were like, we really don't know where you come from. Yeah. Like,
which is the bigger question. How do your folks deal with you as a phenomenon? You know, is there a...
I think they're pretty cool with me. Like,
I mean, you would know if there was a blow up or a...
Yeah, I mean, I think as I've gotten older, like, they kind of understand me more. I think as a kid, like, we were both kind of navigating around each other, and I needed a lot of freedom, and, you know, like, they were being parents, and, you know, so we had a lot of falling out. And then when I moved away, I think we got a better understanding of each other. Yeah. So it's, you know, my parents are pretty spiritual. My mom is she ignored it for a while, and then it started coming up into like her sphere, you know, and so she's like, I don't really know what to make of it, but like, you know, I'm going to deal with this. And now she makes like little altars for the ancestors. And then my dad is just sort of like, we should have a table where all the ancestors' pictures are, and maybe some candles. And my mom's like, an altar? And he's like, no, a table where you put pictures. Like,
and occasionally totems and other things. That but not an altar, I swear to God.
But it's so funny because he's just like, no, a table. Like, and I, you know, we went to the Hoosick Tunnel together, and my dad's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm making sandwiches. He's like, for us? And I was like, no, Dad, for the spirits. And he's like, oh, well, that's nice. And I was like, thanks. And he's like, they probably haven't eaten in a while. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't want us to get run over by any trains, you know? Like, this is good.
And they were cool with you, well, I don't even know cool with you, but becoming an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I think with my grandmother being an artist, and then her and my grandfather owned, like, created the Horseman's Yankee Peddler, and it must have been like, what, the 60s or something? Like, I don't know the date. Yeah. But they sold it later on, and I think it became part of like a larger company. But so I feel like we were always in like that creative sphere. Like my grandparents were very much into like horses and horse racing. So a lot of their art and their writing all focused on that. And so I think my parents were just sort of like, okay, this kind of makes sense that she's doing this. And I think they knew that it was going to be rough, but they were like, okay, we're going to support you in this. Mm-hmm. More just
from guests I've recorded with, my folks didn't object, but they were just worried I wouldn't be able to make a living. Tends to be
I think my parents knew like they have a lot of faith in me. I have to say that. They have a lot of faith in me. Like sometimes I'm like, everything is wrong. And my mom's like, you just gotta think positively. Just, like, she's like, I found 16 affirmations for you. And I'm like, thanks.
Are those more than don't move back in with us? That's.
I think my mom would love if I moved back in with her. But I think she also knows, like, I'm just, I need my space. And
As you talk about Chicago, what brought you here?
So it was interesting. I knew that my time, I always knew when I moved to New York that I would only be there for a limited amount of time. I thought 10 years. I really, really thought. I was like, I'm going to be here for 10 years, and then I don't know where I'm going next. I thought maybe LA or New Orleans. And then it turned out to be 20 years. And I started noticing it was time to go when a lot of my favorite places just no longer existed. And I was like, okay, like, I feel like the city's just telling me, like, it's time to go. It's go. So I was like, all right, where should I go to? So I decided to take, like, I think I took 2 years before I left to just travel around. And I would just, like, book things in different places because I was like, all right, I got to make money somehow while I'm traveling. And I would do classes or, talks and things like that. And Vanessa Sinclair, like, became like my partner in crime for this, because we're like, great, like, let's talk about, like, the Third Mine and William S. Burroughs and Geisen, so we can just, like, travel and do this stuff. And I kept coming back to Chicago, and I couldn't figure out why, because, like, at first I was just like, oh no, this is cool, and then I was like, all right, something here is definitely calling to me, and I couldn't tell, like, if it was, like, the history or the land or what, but I was like, all right, like, I feel like I need to be here. And I just started, thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, like, I really need to be here, and I'm not sure why. And after, like, a few trips, I was like, all right, yeah, like, I'm definitely moving to Chicago. Once I decided to put it out there, like, my big thing was, like, I'm going to put it on Facebook, and, like, that's going to make it real.
Yeah, at that point, yeah.
Because I was like, if I could just keep it in, like, it could be, like, 3 years later, and I'll still be thinking about it. But I decided to do some visual magic to get here, too. Yeah. So I was already creating small film vignettes, and they had been in mostly, like, Romani film festivals and things like that, and I was like, what if I created a film that showed the actual movement of me getting there? And I made it very vintage, so it's like this train and, like,
black and white with a stutter and everything.
Yeah, totally. But I did that, and then I also used these images of my face and, like, sort of photoshopped this film still that said Chicago over it, and I put that up as my profile picture, and I was like, I'm going to change the energy. And then I made this book right here, which is, like, this pop-up book, and it's all about, like, this journey, which I created a character, and it's this actress. So going back to, like, my little sort of kid youth. Dreams, it's, like, this sort of, like, 1920s, 1930s actress who's, like, traveling around, meeting, like, her lover in, like, different spaces, and she's writing to him. And each place gets her closer to where she needs to be, which is her end point is Chicago. And so I took all these photos and created this book. And right when I finished this book, I had to send it to the UK to be in, like, a gallery show. But the last place to go was Atlantic City, where I had to, like, pick up some dirt. And yeah, it was this whole journey. And then I got the dirt, and, like, I found, like, myself, like, looking at the book, and I was like, oh my God, it's going to happen. Then all of a sudden, all the money came in that I needed to move. And I was like, wow, I just made this crazy spell that just gave me everything that I needed. And so I booked a ticket here to look for a place. I cried a lot because I had a week to find an apartment. There was one apartment that's, like, 4 times this size that was cheaper than this one. And I was like, I should take this. My mom's like, get an apartment you can grow into. And then I, like, freaked out and, like, messaged Billy. And I was like, but there's this apartment that was an old hotel. And he's like, you're going to regret every day that you don't feel like a 1920s movie star walking out of your hotel. And I was like, you're right.
He knows you too well.
He does.
And you get the lake from here, too.
And that's what I said. Like, I wanted to live in an old hotel. I wanted to live by the lake. And I wanted to live by the Green Mill. And this has all 3.
What attracts you about hotels?
You know what? I think it's the whole thing of the history of who goes there.
Yeah.
It's like, who's walked in here? Like, who has, come in here on business, who has come here like, leisurely, who's had a fight in here, like who's like had an affair in here, So it's this whole history of like everyone that's stepped foot in the hotel, and I just feel like they carry so many memories, like within the walls and in the spaces, that I just kind of like want to be in it.
Yeah. Last week's guest told me she prefers hotels to being home, but not like this, not a converted place, but her thing was, it's full of choice. There's always this possibility, and there's always the what happened in this room before. Even if it's like a modern business hotel, there's still the finding a pair of ripped up stockings stuck under the bed. She's like, I have no idea what happened in this room before I got here. Everything is open. The world is possibility.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, it's fun. I remember one of the trips here, actually where I did most of the filming for the film vignette to kind of like, that was a visual spell. Vanessa and I stayed in Al Capone's doctor's or dentist's, room. And it was in the hotel formerly called the Burnham, which then they changed to a Stay Pineapple. It's not a good name change.
Just told me one of the a guy I know from work. I bumped into him at the airport. I was in this enormous taxi line, and I'd said, what hotel are you staying in case we could go together? He's like, the Pineapple.
Yes.
So I'm like, I've never heard of that. And it's a crappy name for a hotel, but whatever. Yeah. So good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
You can just call it the Burnham.
Good.
They gave me a keychain before they closed, so I was like, oh, I have a piece of it. But. So they were funny because when I walked in there, I had this old vintage suitcase. I had this fur coat on. I had this hat, this Borsalino hat. Yep. And they were like, who?
The time just turned back?
And then people kept coming to my hotel room all the time. So they were like, it was so funny because they'd like bring food up there. And sometimes they'd bring extra things like hot chocolate. And like they'd knock on the door and sort of peek in. And the reason that we got the room there is because Vanessa and I wanted to do this thing on like time travel. Can you feel the essence of whoever was there before? And so it was Al Capone's dentist, quotes. I'm doing air quotes there. But I stayed a few extra nights, I think. And Vanessa had left. And I couldn't sleep that night. And I was like, this is so weird. This is such like a nice room. And I don't understand why I can't sleep. And then I had like this horrible nightmare of someone getting murdered. And I was like, what is going on? So then I was like, maybe I should like research what actually happened here. And it turns out his dentist had his throat slit in that room. And it was right after the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Yeah. So they might have thought he was a snitch or something. Yeah. But I was like, whoa, like the essence of things does still linger sometimes. And it was such an incredible trip because I was also collecting information for an article that I was writing about time travel and like, going to the places that someone had visited, back in like the 1920s and to see if there was any of that residual energy still there. And so many people that I would talk to, I was expecting them to be like, why are you doing something on Al Capone? Like, blah, blah, blah. But Chicago, like, loves him. Yeah. And they're like, no, we needed him. Like, the other gangs were awful, and he was keeping the streets clean, and he was helping out people. And I was like, whoa. Like, so that was huge for me, too. Because, like, people would be like, why are you so interested in this? And I was like, I'm very interested in the duality of this. Yeah. So that was, like, something like magic. And I knew then, I think that was the trip that I actually decided that I was going to move. Mm-hmm. And I told Billy on that trip too. And he had given me a present and we were sitting at the table and I was like, I'm going to move here. And he was like, I think it's going to do amazing things for your art.
How does it compare to New York for you?
There is a bit of a cultural shock. Yeah. Not necessarily in a bad way, but like,
but different.
It's definitely different. And like New York, even if you live in Coney Island, you're going to still take those 6 trains to the Bronx to see your friends. Yeah. Whereas like in Chicago, like everyone seems to stay in their neighborhoods, which is a little bit shocking to me because I'm like,
you want to cross borders?
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to cross every border. Like I'm going, like even if I got to ride my bike, like I'm just going. So that's a little bit different. Also, I mean, Chicago is very much into like, Chicago writers, Chicago, theater, Chicago, you know, everything about like Chicago, where I feel like New York is just like, come on, like we are the
or a melting pot in a good way, though. I mean,
yeah,
the
absolutely.
idea that everybody comes there to prove themselves,
exactly,
as opposed to
exactly. So you know, but I mean, I find that I really like it here. You know, I don't feel like I want to move back to New York or anything like that. I definitely miss certain aspects of New York and people, but I definitely feel like I'm more at home here. And, you know, part of it is I get to like live by the lake.
With the water spirit. That's
yes.
But yeah, what's the your affinity to water? I know you've taken up.
I do. You know what? I was just talking to Tiana McQuiller about this the other day. So her and I are like river people. Like, you know, she goes to the Hudson River, and I used to spend almost every day at the East River. Yeah. And I felt like me and the East River had like this beautiful relationship. And when I was sad, I would go to the river. And also the river is associated with Oshun, who is the river goddess of love, creativity, everything that, you know, the pleasures in life. So I had certain spots, and it was beautiful. And that was one of the things that I was most sad about leaving, because I was like, oh my God, I'm leaving. So I gathered some of the water and I brought it with me, and I still have it. I'm like, this is my river water. But and you know, like, I think when you go to a place enough, like, you do sort of form a friendship with it. Like, there was one year I told Tiana, I was like, it was the day after my birthday. I had to work on my birthday, and I was like, I'm going to go to the river. I just felt called to go to one specific place, and I went there. And there were birthday balloons tied to the rock. And I was like, I don't know how this happened. I don't know who did this, but like, and you know, they obviously weren't for me, but it was like this beautiful thing. Yeah. And I was like, it's like the river, like, got me balloons. So, you know, it was just all these magical things would happen. And I would find playing cards, like, on the river glass. And I would read the playing cards, and it would tell me exactly what I was going through. And I was like, this is like so magic for me. So when I was moving, I was like, okay, I don't have the ocean and I don't have the river. So I was like, I need to live as close to the lake as possible. And sometimes I felt like the lake was calling me here. And I've told Valia Lepescu that before. And she's like, yeah, like the lake has like this energy. And then Billy and I were driving around one night. And I was like, you know, like, sometimes I feel like the lake just called me here. And he was like, you know, I was born on the lake. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I always felt like the lake had a piece of me. And I was like, oh my God. And, you know, it was just one of those things where, you know, I feel like he's like one of like my friendship, like, soulmates, you know, like, I'm not even sure how I feel about soulmates, but like,
we'll use the term.
We'll use the term. But, you know, it was just one of those things where it's like, oh my God, so many people that I love have this connection to this lake, and it's so beautiful and big and vast. And, you know, it's just sort of like calling her people to it.
Did you have a birth call?
Do I have a birth call?
Did you have the call?
I mean,
CAUL, I mean. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I didn't. Okay. I was like, wait, call where? Yeah. Oh my God.
But we know what I mean.
Sorry, that went over my head.
Yeah. I'm just thinking in the fear death by water and it's as far as our totemic and weird mythologies go.
Right.
But tell me about teaching, though, because you talk about, again, like doing these, I don't even know if you want to call them seminars with Vanessa and people like that.
Yeah.
How did you get into that, and how did you get better at doing it? Because nobody's good at that stuff the first time around. Yeah.
It all started with Harry Houdini. Vanessa is amazing. Like, we got together through, a series of rituals and things like that. And that's how we met. And then we started talking more when both of us were going through like a really big transitional period in our lives. And we're just like, we just got together one night and we're like, man, we get along so well. And I was like, you know, and we were talking about all our interests, and we decided that we should go to Harry Houdini's grave. And do you know Lady J. Briar Peorage?
Yeah.
So apparently Lady J used to spend a lot of time at Houdini's grave, which like we didn't know right away, but we were just like, we've got to go to Houdini's grave. And it became kind of like our our place.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's like incredible energy around. I mean, the first time we went there, we got locked inside the cemetery, and it was kind of hilarious. And because they're like, when they say that the gates close at this time, they really mean it. But there was like this weird gap in the gate, so we're like, okay, let's squeeze through. But we started going there and we started talking more, and both of us were interested in the work of Burroughs and Geisen, and we started talking about Third Mind. And we were like, we should do work and, you know, see where it goes. And we came up with the idea of chaos of the Third Mind, because it is chaos. But it's like this magical...
No, things seem so organized already.
Things flying around. But yeah, so it was like... It came together very naturally, and then we started doing cut-ups together. We started recording them together. We started to take photographs and document things. And when I decided I needed to like travel around to kind of search for where I was going to move, we both decided like, oh, this would be a great opportunity to kind of talk about Burroughs and Geisen and, you know, what we're doing, because it was such a heavy male saturated thing when they were doing it. So, you know, it's kind of interesting that, you know, like these two women are doing it now. So we were like, okay, like let's think on this. And so we started traveling around. I think we have some of the talks recorded. I'm not sure how good or bad we are. I think we just sort of vibed off each other and just... You know, you always have this idea of like what you're going to talk about and maybe like a little paper that says it, but...
Trust me, if anytime I have to do public speaking, there'll be a list of bullet points. I might get through the first one, and then it's to really understand that, though, and 40 minutes are gone before you know it. So, yeah.
And I think, you know, whether we were good at speaking or not, I'm not sure, but I think people really enjoyed the enthusiasm that we had for it, and like that we could really just sort of like play off of each other. So I would say something and she's like, and that brings up this, and this is how it goes into, you know, analytic, you know, speak and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, so she could like pick up certain key points, and then I would jump in and get other key points. And I felt like we were a very good team that way. And we started working on a book together. So that one, Fulgur Limited, has picked up, and that's going to be probably like maybe in like the next year or two. But we started compiling all of our cut-ups and, you know, the talks that we did, and we started having those like, you know, like, you know, sort of printed out and put into different books. And so now we're just sort of compiling everything. But as far as going back to the original question, like whether we were good, I have no idea.
Did you feel comfortable being in front of an audience or being in front of...
I did. I mean, I think it's easier when you have like a partner next to you, because then it's like not just you. But I tend to freak out beforehand. And then during it, like I just
forget
everything and just sort of go on. And then people are like, that was great. And I was like, oh my God.
I guess I wasn't there, but...
Yeah. So, you know, and even with like interviews, sometimes I'm like, I completely bombed that. And like people are like, what are you talking about?
I hope you're not uptight about this one, because I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. No.
Talk about the role of anxiety in your life.
Anxiety is huge in my life.
Yeah. Anxiety is my drug of choice, and it generally works well, but, you know, occasionally it's crippling. So.
Yeah. I mean, it can definitely be crippling. I mean, I definitely have a very, very, very bad case of outsider syndrome.
Yeah.
So when I'm working on a project, it's not there. When I finish the project and it's about to go live or does go live, then it all comes down and it's like, you probably used the wrong reference photo and everyone's going to know it's that photo and you did it wrong. And you know what? You didn't look up that costume. So maybe it's a red scarf and you used a blue scarf and everyone's going to know. And all the historians are going to throw darts at your face. Like, and, I mean, and then I'll be like, and it just goes down from there. So I have to do these certain things. I call them scientific experiments where I'm like, okay, let's go through every single thing that I used. And does it look like this? And does it look like that? And is this an ode to something? And is that, and I have to like do that. And it's tedious and it takes up so much time, but it's just something that I have to do. And another thing that I have to do, like, I started taking St. John's wort too, because, I mean, I'm okay with, like, taking medicines and things like that. If, like, the doctor tells me to, like, take something. But I like to do it for, like, a period of time. I don't want to be on it long term. And when I've gone through, like, bouts of really bad anxiety or, like, depression, like, I'll tell the doctor, I'll be like, can I be on this for, like, 3 to 6 months and then, you know, get off of it without some sort of addiction.
Yeah, or horrible withdrawal.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, usually they'll guide me along and I'm like, okay, great. But right now, like, mostly I've just been trying to work it out creatively. So I was like, okay, what is going to calm me down? Photo editing. Like, for some reason, photo editing is where it's at. Or creating films. Yeah. Because I'm just editing these things and I feel like it's almost like this meditation for me.
That it's more the technical aspect of it?
And I think it's just like, it just switches something off. And it's like, no, you're not doing this. Like, and I'm like, okay. But, you know, I started swimming too. And I bought myself a bike. So then I sort of bike along the bike trail here. And I've been just doing like a number of these different things, just being like, okay, you've got to get out of this. Because sometimes my anxiety is like, you know what you should do? You should eat 3 boxes of chocolate. Like,
all your time online, but don't actually talk to anybody.
Yes. While you're eating chocolate. And also too, I think kind of like monitoring the time that we spend online. Like, I always have pages open, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm online. Yeah. You know, and I'll try to just sort of watch documentaries, things like that are sort of nourishing myself, because I mean, it is so easy for me to just fall into that hole of despair and anxiety and really freak out about things. And especially like too, like when I'm starting like a project, like when I was doing Billy's tours, I was so riddled with anxiety because I was like, I have to make one of my best friends, like, I have to make sure he looks good on stage. Yeah. Like, I can't mess this up. Like, you know, and
the 20,000 people are going to be looking at it.
Right. And I wasn't even thinking of that. I was thinking of like, it's funny. That didn't even occur to me until after. But like, it was like, I have to make sure that my like friend is happy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that he has something beautiful that's behind him that represents what he's putting out there. Then once the tour starts, I'm like, oh my God, there's all these people looking at it. Yeah. Like, close your eyes.
Yeah. Like, that's just background. Don't worry about that.
You see me like outside in trying to cover up a giant stage. Yeah. And he's like, what are you doing? Yeah. But he's also very good at calming me down. Like, I'll message him, or, you know, he's really tapped in. So sometimes he'll be like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I've been pacing around my house all day. And he's like, let's just have dinner. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay. And then he'll be like, so what are you upset about? You know, like, and he has this really great way of really condensing everything down to like this, like, one simple thing. And he's just like, well, the real problem is that blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, I just spent the last month trying to figure that out. And he's like, yeah, well, it's just, you know, very simple. But
when you're on the inside of it.
Right, right.
And having somebody who knows you that well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell me about Marrakesh.
Oh, yeah. It was beautiful.
Speaking of, you were teaching, you were in...
yes, and I got stuck there.
Dish.
But, so Shireen and I decided to do a retreat together. Shireen Shostak, she's a brilliant astrologer, and her and Billy and I are actually working on another project together. Yeah. So that will be like in the future. I'll say more. But, so she was like, hey, do you want to do this retreat? Because I think that the owner might be selling the place, and, you know, like, this might be the last time that we can actually, like, go there and, like, experience it, depending on whoever buys it. So I was like, yeah, that would be great. And
what was the place?
It's called Riyadh Ania, and it's this beautiful... It's a hotel, but it used to be a palace that a king lived in, and then it was bought by a rich silk merchant in like the 1600s. Duh. And he created it into a personal home, and then it fell into disrepair for many, many years. And this woman, Ursula, bought it and basically hired all of these local people to like redo it. as historically accurate as they could.
But also enough to bring people in.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's just, I mean, when you look at this place, you're like, I can't believe I get to stay here. Yeah. It was like being in a temple. I had this room that was right off the main courtyard, and there's no locks on any of the doors, but like, you don't worry. It's like the safest place I've ever been.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I have trouble sleeping in hotels, which is weird because I love them.
Your obsession with them. Yeah.
But I slept perfectly. Like, and I was like, this is so strange because there's like no locks on the doors. Like, there's just, you know, like, but one of the most beautiful things about it is that in Marrakesh, like, there's a call to prayer every couple hours. And there was this one day where I'm in this gorgeous, you know, room that possibly like a princess or a prince like lived in. And I woke up at 5 a.m. to the call to prayer, and I was like, this is like being in a temple. And I was like, I am so lucky to be experiencing this right now. And it sort of set the tone for the entire retreat, because I was like, oh my God, like, here we are in this gorgeous place teaching people about glamour magic, which essentially is part of like the whole mythology, you know, personal mythology, and, you know, creating this life for yourself. And we were in this gorgeous space and like in the middle of the souk. So all of these like street, and I mean, you really can get lost in like the souk. Like, I mean, you could probably get lost for maybe 2 days in the souk, like just sort of if you don't know where you're going. But it was just so amazing because it's this place that really is almost about time travel. It's like you see people in modern day dress, but you also see people just dressed very traditionally. You see people vending these items, these like beautiful items and colors and just everything that's so filled with quality, and everyone's pouring tea and they're inviting you to sit down and tell your stories. And it's like, this world does not exist. I was like, in the US, we are doing it so wrong. I was like, we should all be pouring each other delicious mint tea and telling each other stories while we're surrounded by beautiful objects. And so it became like this like source of like inspiration for me. I was trying to photograph it in a way that wasn't intrusive, because in some, especially the older Muslims, feel that if you photograph them, it takes part of their soul. So I was like, okay, I really need to be careful of who I'm photographing and how I'm photographing things. But I also didn't want to be like the Instagram like influencer that's like getting the money shot. And I was like, no, like, I want people to experience this. Like, I want them like through my photographs and like through these experiences to see what these, you know, small corners like and places look like.
Did it put you in mind of Burroughs and Tangiers? And
absolutely. I was thinking of that like too, because I was like, I accidentally told someone I was going to Tangier, and then they were like, "What, Katelan? No, you're not." And I was like, "Oh God."
Same thing. Well, whatever. I'm just following my spirit. That's
I was like, they're both in Morocco, okay? You know, being there and doing the retreat, like we had 8 women with us, and all different backgrounds, and that was kind of beautiful too, because like you never know who's going to sort of come on these trips with you, and you know how they're going to interact with each other. And all of these people just had all of these amazing stories, and no one ever thinks of like their story is amazing, but then when they tell it, you're like, that's amazing. Like,
that's why I do this.
Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, it's just whatever. And it's just like, no, you know? And at the end, Shireen decided, she was like, at the end dinner, she was like, you know what? Like, we should each say something about everyone that came here. And I was like, man, I haven't done that in years. You know, like, I think the last time I did that was like in high school, where like we each had to write something nice about someone in the class. Mm-hmm. And so we run around the table, and it was just so beautiful to see how people saw each other, because no one ever, I mean, I was like even amazed the way people saw me. And I was like, this is so good to hear, because we always have like this idea of ourselves. And then to hear things from other people was just so amazing and beautiful. And like, you can actually like be like, okay, this is, you know, this is the energy that I'm putting out there.
Yeah. It's not simply what's on The drama inside your head.
Right. It's not the anxiety. Like, the anxiety is like, everyone's laughing at you. Like...
Trust me. And when we're off mic, I'll fill you in on some of the imposter syndrome stories from my side, where I also realized, no, everybody's faking it. It's not just me. They're all full of shit.
And also, I mean, people have to remember, like, the reason I met Molly Crabapple is, like, we had the same idea, but she was doing it and I was just thinking it. Yeah. And I, like, looked up stuff online and I was like, man, like, this girl is, like, doing these drawings and all of this stuff. I was like, who is this person? I started to get a little jealous or envious. And then I was like, I don't want to feel this way. I was like, I should get to know this woman.
Yeah, I should support somebody who's doing the thing I wish existed in the world.
Because at first I was starting to get envious, and I was like, oh, girl, you cannot go down this path. Like, you cannot, like, hate someone you don't know, you know? So I ended up, like, reaching out to her, and, you know, like, our first interaction was, like, an interview I did with her for, like, a magazine I was working at the time. And then the second time we met up, it was, like, she needed a model, and I was like, yeah, you know, I'll model for you. And we became, like, the best of friends. And I was like, this is why, you know, going back into, like, imposter syndrome, like, when you're having, there's going to be, like, 10,000 people that are having all the same ideas as you. Yeah. You know, like, everyone is roving around these ideas, and...
Oh, anytime I think of a great pun, I'll just search it online to make sure somebody or 5,000 people have already thought that pun up before. Yeah. So, oh, good, I don't have to do anything with this because it's already been used and
Right. And it's like, you know, like, we think, like, oh, I figured it out, you know, and then you're like, Google, and you're like, I guess it didn't. But... then, you know, sometimes you get great friendships out of it. So,
artwork that you want to make?
I was just talking about this too. I never cared about doing a solo show until this year.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I want to make an interactive solo show. I want to take in the parts of creating giant theater backdrops and... I want to, you know, create, like, a show that's all about going through, like, this world that's in my head where, again, it goes back to this time travel and not being able to tell, like, are you in, you know, 2019 or are you in, you know,
please God, any other year than this? Yeah,
hybrid of, you know, like some other year. But I want it to be like a space where people, when they walk in, it's almost like this magical new world. And I've done that with rituals before, where I've created this space and giant props for it. And people walked in and were like, whoa, like, this is like walking out of, like, the mundane and into the magical. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And there's a Romani saying called Achintan, which I have, like, the little sign there. And it means stopping place. And that's what I want to create with my art. I want to create a place where people stop and they breathe. And when Molly came to visit me, I was talking to her because I was concerned about where my art was going. And I was like, am I doing anything that's, like, worthwhile? Of course, anxiety, you know, like, you know. And she was like, I was like, because I'm not political enough. I just, you know, I don't know what I should be focusing on. And she was like, but you're providing everyone with, like, this respite of beauty. And she was like, that's why people, like, come to you. She was like, because they need a place to breathe. And she was like, that's what you do. She was like, the fighters can't keep fighting if they can't breathe. And she's like, if they can't rest. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, like, that's what I need to do. I need to create this world where people can kind of escape. And my friend Stoya was visiting me too. And she was like, you know what's so nice about your apartment is, she was like, it's the layers. And she's like, what's so comforting about layers? And I was like, I think it's because you can peel them away or put them back on. And she was like, that's it. And she was like, this place is so inviting because there's so many layers, and you can either peel them away to look outside or you can close them up to have more privacy.
I feel terrible because it's a perfect place for us to end the conversation. Katelan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that was Katelan Foisy. Check out her work on her website, KatelanFoisy.com. And now, the great challenge of spelling that. KATELANFOISY.com. She's on Instagram and Twitter as Katelan Foisy, all one word, spelled the same way. Follow her Instagram feed because she posts some beautiful stuff there. Not just her art, but also photography, some of the short movies or clips of them. There's a whole ton there. Also, on her website, go to the market page because it's got various types of art and magic consultations and tarot consultations for sale. That's KatelanFoisy.com/market. Oh, and look up the Sibyl's Oraculum, spelled just like it sounds. But really, just go to her site, luxuriate in the art, the photography, the movies, the prose. It gives me some hope when an artist like Katelan can make her way in this world, you know? And I've talked about that before, the sort of commodification of everything, the metricization of everything. To see someone who can make art like this and build a following and all, it's pretty heartening. And after we wrapped, I asked Katelan, so, who you're reading? And trust me, she had a whole stack of books because I actually prepped her for that one and just said, I'm going to ask this. So if you want to hear her answer and get a little extra conversation, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. The first quarter 2019 episode features book recommendations and extra conversation with Jerome Charan, Peter Cooper, Edmund White, Eva Hagberg Fisher, Mort Gerberg, James Osland, Joe Chardello, James Sturm, Martin Haglund, Bram Presser, and Nathan Englander. You can support the Virtual Memories Show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for patrons, including that podcast, patron-only blog, handwritten show notes for every episode, my secret project, which is actually a zine that I really need to get back to writing, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. Now, I recorded this one at Katelan's home in Chicago while I was out there for a trade show, so that was about $30 total for Lyft rides there and back from my hotel, but all the other expenses were covered by work. Still, if you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or just toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. A special thanks go out to Nick Bartosik, Michael Hacker, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Kevin Katila, Jack Lescamella, Teresa Lewis, Stephen Nadler, Jim Ottaviani, Payne Prophet, Dmitry Samarov, someone who goes by Buzz Sawyer, although that might not be their real name, Stephen Solomon, Greg Tanner, Ford Thomas, and Garrett Zecker for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. Check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2014 and listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week, but I have no idea who with. Last weekend's guest flaked out on me and requested I not post the conversation, so we won't get that one. That said, it might be a mini episode centered on the session I'm doing with Seth on May 7th at the Strand. Maybe one of my podcasts from this weekend at Toronto Comic Arts Festival. I have no idea. You better come back and find out. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, go on social media, talk about it there, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. Now, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.